Welcome to Life Happens, where Texans come to protect their legacy and prepare for the second half of life. Join your host, attorney Kim Hegwood of Your Legacy Legal Care, and our weekly guest as we navigate the challenges that emerge as life happens. Now here's your host, Kim Hegwood.
Good morning and welcome to Life Happens with me, Kim Hegwood, and our very special guest today is Paige Neumeyer. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I'm good. Thank you.
And so you have a company, Aging Mind Care. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
I figured it was important to kind of talk about the name of the company because we're going to be talking about dementia diagnosis. What now? So I was thinking it kind of helps to reinforce, what we're going to talk about. And so we're going to kind of start off with something simple to make sure that our listeners kind of get where we're going. So let's talk about the difference between mild cognitive impairment and dementia. And what's the difference?
Yeah. So I'll start with dementia because the primary, definition of dementia it's an overall decline in memory, but also other cognitive skills, and that generally will affect your daily living activities. So mild cognitive impairment is you're noticing those changes more than the typical aging changes, a little bit more, but mild cognitive impairment may not necessarily be interfering with your daily activities that you're doing. And it is common to have typical aging. As we get older, naturally our brain is getting smaller, so we're slower at processing, having processing speed, remembering where we put things, and those are kind of typical. But if you are kind of noticing a little bit more, I do always encourage people just to go get it checked out, because there's a lot of things medically and mental health wise that can often mimic dementia. And so, I know I have a family member that when they were first diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment. And the neurologist told her, about a third of the people that are diagnosed never even progress on to have dementia. And those that do, it's a slow progression. So don't, keep that from getting you to the doctor.
And so definitely, you were talking about sometimes it's medical. And so a lot of times UTIs, urinary tract infections, or, so I caution clients when they call and they're like, oh my God, all of a sudden they've just lost their mind kind of thing. And you're like, well, they need to go see the doctor first. Let's
Right.
make sure it's not something simple. And,
Yes, because dementia doesn't happen, suddenly. So if something is happening very extreme, very suddenly, most likely, it's more medical.
yeah. So what are the benefits of having a good diagnosis, especially early on?
Just with anything really, early intervention always improves the outcome. In the later intervention, sometimes lesser can be done. So, if someone medically is having a lot of pain, a lot of problems, naturally most people, go to the doctor pretty soon to figure out what it is, to alleviate the symptoms. And even if it is a chronic diagnosis, catching things early can help, either alleviate the symptoms, reduce the symptoms, reduce the risk of it affecting other things. So dementia is, kind of think of it the same way. The longer that you wait, the more that can progress, the more it can affect other things. And sometimes people will often isolate themselves because they're afraid of others noticing. They can't keep up with the conversations. And so then that is kind of a domino effect, because they then become sad, lonely, depressed, or even medically, weaker because they're not doing as many activities, which can lead to falls. So again, just that domino effect that can help. And then also, if the earlier the more that you can be involved with the care planning. So calling, people like yourself, the elder law attorney, to make sure you've got everything in place for that long-term planning, then you are actively part of that process.
And so, what do y'all recommend the first steps be after you get that dementia diagnosis?
So I will say, first off, just if you are the person helping to care for someone that's gotten that diagnosis, don't assume, don't jump in, try to fix it. Give them pause and just acknowledge things that are going on. Show your support. We're going to get through this together. I'm going to be there to help you. Praise them for taking that step, because everyone, is very fearful. There's still that stigma, of what others are going to think or things. And then as the care partner, I think just talking with the person diagnosed, but also talking about it with others, because the more you talk about things, the more it's normalized. The stigma is less because you're educating people. People know, sometimes they don't know what to say. They don't know what to do. But if you make it something that you openly talk about, and then you open yourself also to seeking more support, so that as you go along the journey, it's not just you. You've got support of others. You can't be the Lone Ranger. And then also, I think the biggest thing is seeking more answers, more knowledge. A lot of times people will ask me, well, if I have a dementia diagnosis, what's the point in knowing like what type? Which I think knowing the type is very important. I do presentations on understanding dementia, and I talk about how dementia is like an umbrella. And so it's the overall umbrella, but there's different types of dementia, of course, Alzheimer's, vascular, frontotemporal. And so I give a presentation that explains kind of how the brain works and what's being affected by dementia. So say frontal temporal, for example, our temporal lobe is where we hear and process. So if someone is constantly saying, what, and then you go get their hearing check and they are hearing fine, and you're thinking they're just ignoring me, or they're just being, defiant. But really, they are processing 1 out of every 4 words. So what you're saying isn't making sense. So that's just their natural way of saying what to better understand. So things like that, when you kind of understand what's being affected, you have more knowledge, you have more ability to be prepared on how to help and make it just a good quality support relationship for both you and the person that, that may be living with dementia.
Well, that's good information. And so always in that aspect of it. And so, but I find that people, you talk about, they say, well, I've got dementia. They don't do anything else. So you and I both know there's different medications that can slow the process and things like that. And sometimes, sometimes knowledge is power. It gives you options in regards to, how you handle, the disease and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And, but a lot of people are concerned about, do they just, because a lot of times your diagnosis comes from your primary care physician. You go in and you tell them, I'm being forgetful, things like that. And they're like, oh, well, you probably just have dementia. And so do you recommend that they see a specialist, like a neurologist, if that's the case?
I do. And I think there are so many, for example, a geriatrician. The geriatrician is someone that specializes in aging care issues. So just like, we have pediatricians, we naturally take our babies and our kids to pediatricians because that's their specialty of study. So I kind of say the same way with geriatricians, that's their specialty of study. They may be looking for something a little bit different than someone else may be looking. They may know a little bit difference of medication reactions to certain people that may be having things. However, I know people are often attached to their primary care doctors. They've been with them forever. They trust them. And that is fine, as long as they feel like those needs are being addressed, or they may then refer them, they can still see their primary care doctor, and then maybe be referred to a neurologist. I would just recommend whoever it is has like geriatrics in front of their title. So geriatric neurologist, because, there are neurologists for all different types of brain trauma, brain injury, but someone that's a geriatric neurologist is primarily most likely worked with people with dementia and seeing those cognitive changes and know what to look for. Because a lot of times, even in the beginning, some of those MRIs and CAT scans, they still may be a little bit inconclusive. It doesn't always show answers, and so, and even those cognitive tests too. So I think that's why I think just making sure it's someone that's delving deeper and asking the right questions and addressing, the concern.
So speaking of that, having someone ask questions and, in doing that, why do y'all recommend that someone hire, someone like yourself, to navigate, the dementia world?
I feel, it's so beneficial. And a lot of times people don't realize it until they've talked about it with someone. I have a lot of clients that say just after that first, consultation, wow, I just didn't realize how much weight I feel lifted just from talking about it. And as a social worker, I've worked in the field with, the aging population for over 20 years. And I've just seen how families, the aging challenges can sometimes take you by surprise. Someone that's living alone all of a sudden has a fall or a stroke, everything changes. And, the person is so overwhelmed. The family is overwhelmed, just knowing where to go, what to do, don't even know what questions to ask. And so, I think having that support is so valuable, and just not only just being able to talk with someone that can kind of validate, understand, support, but also have resources. Okay, what's the next step? Kind of what is, there's so many different terms, skilled nursing, long-term care. What is that? It kind of explaining what are different things. And then just, again, just providing support and also education with, understanding dementia.
And so what's the difference? Because I heard you say you're a licensed social worker, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So tell our listeners what the difference is between, a licensed social worker, a care manager, a senior advisor, and maybe why you want one over the other.
Yes. Well, I think you can have different people in different roles, like geriatric care managers or aging life specialists are social workers, they're nurses, different. And so in my title, when starting Aging Mind Care, I titled myself, in addition to having my clinical social work license, I also am a dementia care consultant. And I use that in a variety of ways. I do use my clinical counseling skills to help support, validate, and just, again, the talking piece of it, but also in the resource piece of it, being a social worker. And I even work with senior advisors. So if someone is needing something more, needing a little bit more, kind of hands-on, going to the communities, finding, and I can even work with senior advisors and geriatric care managers, especially if a geriatric care manager is a nurse and it's someone that has a lot of nursing needs and needs a little bit more in that direction, And then also I would just say, with my background, I'm certified as a dementia trainer. So also just being able to provide education to the families, to the community, and to the professionals. If someone's needing help in a community and things just aren't going right, coming in and kind of helping, working together to kind of help everybody understand what's going on.
Me personally, I think what you do is spectacular for clients, and we always encourage them to, to have that person that can help them walk through, because there's so many things that they don't know, and you
Right.
don't know what you don't know until you find somebody that knows what to ask.
Yes.
Because sometimes it's just asking the right questions.
Exactly.
What questions do I ask? I'm going to see this doctor. I have this diagnosis, so they want to do some more testing. What do I need to know?
Mm-hmm.
What would be helpful? We encourage people to take somebody with them to the doctor's office, because you hear different things, or sometimes if it's you don't hear everything because you hear the worst thing, and then that's the only thing that retains. And
Mm-hmm.
you need someone that can say, well, wait a minute, don't be all upset. The doctor said, this, and this.
Right.
And so, so I think it's really crucial that, someone that's really good, that knows their stuff, that gives them the ability to, to lead them down the right path, so that they can feel confident and, in what they're doing,
Yes.
in this caregiving, for someone who, has that diagnosis of dementia, it's very difficult.
Mm-hmm.
So I saw a client recently that just got diagnosed with Alzheimer's, And she's in my office, and it's an early diagnosis, and she cried the whole time she was there.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, I just don't know what's going to happen. I said, you're going to be happy.
Mm-hmm.
I said, you're going to be happy. You're going to be great. You're not
Mm-hmm.
going to have any problems at all. Well, what about the kids? Oh, they got this, they
Mm-hmm.
know what to do, and
Yes.
that's what we're here for, is to kind of help. And then we send them off to people like you, to
Yes.
help navigate, some of those things that are non-legal, because we handle a lot of the legal stuff. And so it's really helpful in that aspect of it. And so,
Yeah, I agree. And it's not, it's not a be all end all. I mean, there's ways, with the person in my family, when they first got diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment, the doctor even said the best thing you can do is your diet and your exercise and your cognitive stimulation, going out. And, for this client you're talking about, just going and living your life is really the best medicine, and just living your life, and, and not worrying about, to the point where it's affecting it, like I mentioned before, with the domino effect. You just, live your life to the best quality that you can.
and I'm a firm believer that you should live every day like it's your last, and have as much fun as you can. And so,
Yes.
and I don't know about you, but I'm blessed to have a job that I love to pieces. So,
Yes, me too. I'm very passionate, so I love what I do.
So, Paige, if somebody wants to reach out to you, how do they do that?
So I have a website. It's agingmindcare.com. And also you can email me at paige@agingmindcare.com, or also just give me a call, 281-687-9558. And I also do a lot of just community presentations. Like I said, I think it's important just for people to have a basic understanding and not have that stigma of, isolating or just asking questions, and let's talk about it and have conversations.
Perfect. And so, well, Paige, it's been a pleasure having you on the show today, and we look forward to having you on again soon.
Thank you so much. I enjoyed it.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Life Happens with Kim Hegwood. Be sure to tune in every Thursday at 10 a.m. wherever you listen to your podcast, as we navigate through the challenges that emerge as life happens. The content of this podcast does not establish an attorney-client relationship or constitute attorney-client privilege, legal, medical, financial, or any other professional advice.